What's up, guys? How we doing? Right? Just after lunch. Had a little shake it out. Anyone gets tired, feel the needs to fall asleep, no harm, no foul, I will not mind. Right? No big. But real quick, before we get into it, there's going to be a fair amount of code as we go through these slides. Don't worry about taking pictures or grabbing anything. At the end, there's going to be a QR code to the slides themselves, and I'll have the link to the GitHub repo. So you're going to get everything in the end. And as we go on, it's only going to get more abstracted as we've touched and covered previous things. All right, so let's get into it. So, who's this guy? It's me. I'm that guy. As you heard, I'm Rory Heaney. I've been working for WordPress roughly about 13-ish years now. I got into WordPress by basically, I first started by going to design school, graduated, I then got to a little boutique agency where I met real designers and realized that my degree was a very expensive lesson. And then basically after lying through my teeth about knowing some CSS and HTML, here I am. So if that hasn't discouraged you about my qualifications about being here, don't worry, there's still time. So why are we here? We're going to talk about the HTML tag processor. I'll probably just refer to this as the HTML API as we go along, just so I don't have to say that word over and over again. But what is it? Straight from the documentation, it's a core class used to modify attributes in the HTML document for tags matching a query. Usage. As we kind of already just said, we're going to create a new class instance for your input HTML document. Find the tags you're looking for. We're going to request changes to those attributes, reset some tags. I don't know about you, but typically when I was doing stuff or first getting into blocks, I obviously ignored all documentation and just tried, which was a horrible idea because I was doing everything wrong. And you know, you spend a few minutes, you read the documentation that WordPress works so hard to provide us, and you really learn some things. When I came across this feature, it really became a lot like the red car theory. For those who don't know, basically, I haven't seen a red car in a while. And now all I see are red cars. That's because it's at the forefront of your mind. And since using this, the amount of time that I have spent on subreddits answering questions that could be solved with this. Most recently was someone who was using DOM document for what this exact feature is built for. If you don't know DOM document, it's basically an HTML4 spec. You're now coming through XML, it's slow, it's angry looking, it's not a great feature. And as we go through this, we're not just going to limit ourselves to what you see tags or what you perceive attributes can do, right? We're going to sprinkle in some really impressive examples and show you how powerful this tool is. Because we take it for granted that it's just an attribute, right? It's just a source, just an ARIA label. What happens when we can manipulate that or they're missing, right? So, why do I need it, right? Alternative, regex. It's gross. It's gross, right? Come on, we're all adults here. That being said, it is powerful yet hard to use, right? Don't get me wrong. You can do so much with regex, and I assume being good at it is kind of like the moment in Aladdin where he asks the genie what's it like to be a genie, and the genie's like, infinite cosmic power, right? That's probably what it feels like. Or if, there's any StarCraft fans in the audience, power overwhelming, protest or die trying. Sorry. But downside, glyph soup, right? I don't know if you've used regex before or you've seen it. Honestly, most of you have probably seen it. But I don't understand hieroglyphs, and I don't know if you do either. Debugging can be a challenge, right? We take for granted what the document and the DOM looks like. Single quotes, double quotes, no quotes. Did you know, before you could still probably output an image without any quotes? Right, it's crazy. And with regex, we have to take into account everything, every little bit. And you miss any of those things, you're now stuck. You've broken it, or nothing is going to load, or in this infinite loop of death, right? Performance. Complex patterns can slow down your site, and that's a bummer. So we'll just briefly touch on the beauty of one. Now here we're just setting up the pattern, All I want to do is I want to find a strong tag. That's it, right? But remember, you can't trust the output. Double quotes, single quotes, no quotes. You, as the developer, has to think of all these situations. And we just assume that the site's being built or you've taken on a project, that it's going to output in the way you expect it to output. You expect that that has double quotes for that class, right? Just in basic HTML. Doesn't mean it's going to, and if you didn't account for that, then this isn't going to work. Now, this is small on purpose to kind of understand how much work has gone into this after we created a pattern. We're still not done yet. All right, we've got to find the tags that match. Got to make a call back and see what's going on. We got to go through the chunks. Now we found a strong tag. We got to see are the IDs and classes available, right? It just gets worse. Does a class exist? If not, now we have to append it. Maybe it does, and we have to add to it and return what it currently has. Right? This is not working out, right? Let's be honest. There's got to be a better way. Well, there is. A tag-aware approach. And the HTML API avoids these pitfalls. So this little guy was introduced in 6.2. Pretty great. HTML aware and reliable. Now we can parse tags and attributes. All the quotes, no quotes. Yet it's taking care of it, right? But how? Well, let's start to get into that, right? Not just that, but it's going to be readable and maintainable. A clear API, next tag, set attribute, right? Add class, class list, methods we can use and understand. Predictable performance. So this is a single pass scan, no backtracking, even though we can, and we'll show examples of how. But this processor basically is left to right, token by token, and runtime will be linear based off what's going on, unless you explicitly jump with a bookmark, and we'll talk about that too. But next, that previous code example that was annoying and hard to read, well, let's do it right. Just take a minute, take a look at how much better this is, right? You're going to hook into the content, have a new processor instance. Let's check all the tags, bold of any kind, add a highlight class, good to go. Right, this is more readable, more maintainable stuff we can understand, and we're doing it the WordPress way. We're updating the tag, returning the HTML, no one's the wiser. Before, I don't know who was maybe using regex to do this, most of you would probably resort to just using JavaScript, right? Client side, they're not going to notice. You have to below the fold, big hero image up top. Let's just use JS, get all the tags, add something to it. Great. But now there's a little bit of a layout shift maybe. They didn't notice, but you don't care. You don't saw it. But now we're doing the server side. Just taking care of it right off the bat. But why? Not just why, but how. So you might be thinking, so is WordPress just using their own magical regex, right? No. If you read the documentation and go back to the code, there's this aha moment that's absolutely crazy. I don't know if you ever thought about this yourself, but the document, the page, it's only angle brackets, right? Nothing takes place if it isn't inside an angle bracket. Your tag, header, footer, head, text area, paragraph, right? So what this does, it just goes angle bracket by angle bracket, going through the document. No more crazy regex, nothing. Reliable, functional. Why would we use this? Because a classic example is one thing, and that's not really going to knock your socks off, I'll admit that. But imagine going through Gutenberg, or the content in general, and now you're enforcing maybe a tighter design system, right? Normalizing classes, normalizing attributes. And this is the part where we're really going to start to have some fun. We'll see the real power, right? Accessibility at scale. How often have you been given like a JS widget from a client, or they have a source, right? It outputs a list, anything. Almost everyone knows probably to deal with that. But maybe that's not friendly to the user experience. It didn't come with an ARIA Live, and that's not very polite, right? Yeah, someone got that. And, you know, but how would you solve that, right? You could just use JavaScript, look for it, append it to on top of its container. That's annoying. We can do that here. And you could do that here by adding a class to the container and then looking for it and appending it server side. And we'll go into that. But that's real power. That's real power that's user-friendly and is better functionality, right? Performance, right? It's just getting a little spicier every time we keep clicking. Just lazy load all the things. Enforce lazy loading on all images, decoding. Now, WordPress already does a lot of this for us. But we could enforce the other attributes that it's deferred. Why not? Set fresh priority, add an asynchronous tag to a script. You can do all that now, just with that tag processor, right? Safer links and embeds. You're adding relationship tags. Maybe you're adding an ARIA label because something had a target blank, right? Better buttons. Think about it. Let's say you added, and there's a good example on the 10up website that I encourage you to see, where they wanted to add an ARIA label. So they did the work, added the attribute in the admin, made a new field, and then used the tag processor to output it on the links. So now you have a better context-aware version of what the user's seeing. That read more no longer read more, it's ARIA label. Read more about this, right? Target blank, it's open this link in a new window, right? We are, I don't know, I'm already getting fired up. I am. I love it. I think it's huge what this can do, guys. So let's look at a block. This is just a blanket block where it's going through all of them. We're going to check if it's a core list, set up the processor, use the next tag method, which would then give us the ordered list or unordered. We're going to add a class, return it, done. But, you know, we're not knocking anyone's socks off, so let's spice it up a little bit, keep it going. Maybe we want to add a class list and a count of the list total, which again, clients are going to client, and how many of you have had to use JavaScript for some reason to see how long a list is. If it was longer, they want it hidden for some reason or do all this. Now you're doing it all on the client side. There's layout shift, do this. It's not a good experience for anyone, let alone you, and you're the one that has to do it. So what if we updated that and took it a little further? All right, we're going to add the class like we did, and now we're going to set a bookmark. What's a bookmark? Well, it's your chance to basically stick a flag in the sand. Like, hey, I want to come back here. So you have to remember, it goes forward only. We have the option to go back when needed. And I'm just going to call this bookmark list start. We've set our depth count because we only want to go one level. I want to count how many list items there are at the top level of that. Well, we're going to go through it all. We're going to use visit, which means we can now check for closing tags. Because before, we're only going forward. We're not checking for closers, we're checking for openers. Now, it's smart enough we can have methods to check for broken syntax. We're not going to touch on that now, but it's available. And here, we're checking how many have we gone through, and are we at the end? Because when we're at the end of the list in the parent level, we want to go back to the top. And in the next slide, we're going to go through what's going on in that little mark that says next slide will show the markup. When we get to the end, we're going to set list end. We're going to use seek to get us back to the start. So now we're at the ordered list or unordered list, remember? Now we're going to add that data count attribute. And that's just for this example, right? In the previous I said, maybe you had to use JS to hide it. Well, instead of adding that data attribute, what if you just added a style of display none in line? Or you're using Bootstrap and you use dnone as a class, right? Because it was so long or whatever in this scenario. Let's keep it going. So, a little review of what just happened. We targeted a block. It was a list in this instance. We added a class. We dropped a pin. Hey, we're going to go through everything, but this is where I need to return to once I've reached the end, because we want to edit it later. Walk through everything, use Viget so we can see the closers. We've already handled nesting. We've counted all the items. We came back to the top and updated it. Right? And so now we're no longer waiting for the client side to make these updates. Because like I said, clients are going to client. and we take for granted how much we offload on the front end, or how much you put pressure on the front end to then do these things. And now again, we need to think about layout shifts, the user experience, and how are we making it better for everybody, right? And this is a good moment, and I hope everyone is kind of feeling this right now. It also gives me a sec to take a water break, right? Let's keep going. We're having some fun here, I think. So the blanket check we showed before was for all blocks, right? We want to go for a block. It still works, but we'll keep getting better. Now, I don't know who's already doing this. I hope most of you are. If not, keep in mind that we can now target just the list block with render block core, and then append the block name. So here, we're not just targeting it specifically, but now every instance of it. And the next, I previously brought up, think of that example with the Aria Live, right? And that widget. Well, how are we going to get that? Let's say it was in a column. Well, what if we added a class to that column, right? We're going to go through all the lists, or all the columns, or you pick your poison, right? We added a class in the admin, in that input field. Again, we haven't done any custom block development. You're not using scripts, using ACF or the toolkit, nothing. We haven't touched that. And here, we found the column we were looking for with the class fancy logic, or whatever you decided to enter. And now we're adding that Aria Live polite, or that class, or changing the source. Now, the good stuff, right? We're going to use all this, and we're going to change the core video, right? We're about to go through, is going to be all in the repo. You're going to get the full thing. And we're going to modify this without using scripts or anything else. You're not going to have to run npm run serve or anything like that. We're going to see what you can do with just PHP, right? It's wild. Think about it for a second. You're customizing the output. You're not going to impact how the editor works. You don't have to worry about this breaking for them, for yourself. We're going to change how it outputs. I also just want to make it clear again, it's going to get more abstracted as we go because we've already covered certain concepts. But let's keep it going. We're going to run this on the video block. Just that. You could also apply this to the cover block. Think about that, right? We're going to also include a fun little guy. We'll call this the parent kind of processor, not to be confused with the tag processor itself. This was introduced in 6.5. I'm not going to go too far into it, deep into it, but it's just an example. We're going to create an overlay, right? Because how often on your video block is the client like, well, right, you're showing the poster, but there's the controls. Like, can you just put an overlay on top of it with a custom play button? It's just the bane of video existence, right? Not just that, but it would still load the source, right? That's not going to work on a heavy page. Non-destructive. Don't have to worry about anything breaking. We got the code, we got the block, we're going to add the attributes and output accordingly. So, now we're starting to get a little nuts, all right? We've scoped to the video block, great. Going to add the function. We've had a couple classes we're checking for. Now, these variables are going to figure out whether or not we've assigned the classes we've assigned. In this example, we're going to add a class of lazy load and a class of has custom play button. And based off those checks, we're going to go in and we're going to start looking for classes. Oh, we found a class. Great. Has lazy loading. Now we've taken the video source, emptied it out, added a data attribute with the previous source. See where we're going, right? We're picking up steam here. We're going to return it. Great. Oh, sweet. Is there an overlay? We're going to check that this class is available and that they've added the poster, right? Because we just don't want to arbitrarily add an overlay that's then see-through with a button in the center. That would be unpleasant because now we have a custom play button over controls, over a poster inside of a video. Oh, it gives me a headache. And in the end, this is what we have, right? We've outputted a wrapper of the video, the overlay The poster is now on the overlay, a button inside, and as you can see on the figure element, the classes we added from the admin. You know, just take a second, right? Remember, you haven't done any custom block development. None. None. We're just using PHP, just having a good time hanging out, right? Think of this as your chance to dip your toes into the pool if you're not already. If you're not already in the deep end, here's a way to get into modifying how blocks are rendered. Takeaways. Well, we can detect classes, edit attribute scope, changes, no regex, right? I think our previous example of what we did is maybe one of the best examples of this use case, for me at least. I don't remember how many projects I've worked on where it's a nightmare. Your cache is fighting for its life on this video page, right? And just thinking with Gutenberg, let's say open up big cover block, video. Well, we can't really get around that, right? We can do a prefetch, preload, help us out there. We can do that for the whole page, right? That's nuts. Let's just say it's an image. Underneath, another cover block, video. How many of you are getting optimized videos, right? No. Our page is now like 15 megabytes. Get out of here. And maybe I have a couple more videos underneath. We can now lazy load all of that. You can now lazy load all of that. All you did was add a class in the admin, use a little PHP, and I'll give you the JS and the CSS to sprinkle in the rest. The process itself, we parsed, read the poster, wrapped it all in a non-destructive way. And both these features can run together. Not just the tag processor, but its parent. Well, at least I'll call it the parent. And it's all done on the block, right? So just a quick second. Remember, you've done all this now. We've improved accessibility in one scenario. We've performed performance in another, right? And all we're doing are changing attributes. Yeah, sure, add a little like HTML for the overlay, but we take for granted how important attributes are. And when it comes to accessibility and performance, well, in my opinion, this is the way. There's so much more to explore, right? Add a class, make sure everything's all right after a tag, go through a class list. I really encourage you to go through the documentation. Believe it or not, it's short and concise, at least I believe so, and it's mind-blowing what you can do with that. And I encourage you to do so because this will help you get into maybe your future in block development or just a better understanding of the ecosystem and what's going on, right? Well, kind of quick, but just in case there's a lot, let's have a little Q&A. If you have something to say, I encourage you to come up to the mic so we're not screaming at each other. And also, if you don't come to the mic, no one's going to hear you on the stream. No? All right. Well, oh, do we got one? All right, hold up. I'll just leave this on there.
I was just, maybe I should have done a better job and read the documentation a little better, but I was scrolling through and be like, ooh, can you manipulate the contents within a tag? I'm thinking, I had a use case where I have like a alert bar at the top of the page and I want to display the first, I don't know, 150 characters on desktop and only the first 100 characters on mobile. That's a total pain to do. Normally, a bunch of regex, that kind of thing, counting characters, but boy, it'd be a lot easier if I could just say, hey, give me the characters within that tag and then put a span on the last 50 characters or whatever and do it with CSS.
That makes a lot of sense, but no, you cannot.
Okay.
Remember, with the tag processor, we're only at the tag level itself.
Okay,
we're not reading its contents necessarily, we're only reading the attributes.
Cool, thanks.
Yep. Sweet, all right, guys. Get that QR code, it's the slides, the repo, and everything you need.
QR code expired. Yeah.
Oh, well, I'll get that updated after this. No worries. Thanks, guys, really appreciate it for your time. Thank you.